चीट शीट नहीं है, सिर्फ ओपन बुक एग्जाम की तरह है. So I'll only use the board and I'll talk most of the time. So because what I've been talking about is very common sense, doesn't really require much extensive presentation. The talk after mine by Arvind is going to introduce you to the magic of physics. Most of the money that's been lost in the stock market is because people don't understand this simple idea. They think that there are equations out there which can be solved. They think that the data can be analyzed and you can pick out something magical out of it and make a lot of money. In fact, one of the problems that's often cited about the stock market is that, at least initially, engineers and people with higher IQs lose money faster on the stock market than other people because they generally are used to solving problems which nobody else can solve. So it's nothing uncommon for them to find out that, oh, this guy is losing money, he's not like me, so I can solve it, he can't. So the trouble here is the feeling that there is a problem out there to be solved in the market, problem, a virtual problem, it doesn't have a solution. Now the realization of this is the first key to making money on the stock market. And what I've been doing in this talk, which I made specially, I haven't really written anything big here, there's no presentation, but there are two concepts that I want to get through to you. One is a concept which has nothing to do with you being engineers. You could have been graduating from anywhere and taking up a job shortly. But it's a simple concept and I'll explain why as the talk goes on. Is that if you start investing in the stock market from your very first salary and put in a little bit, whatever you can manage every month from your salary and make it a habit. Even if your salary is really small, but you just start the process, you'll be extremely well off, especially in India, in about 10 years. So most of us, even I didn't do that, start getting into the market when you've got enough money in the bank and all your initial needs are satisfied, you buy all the things that you wanted to, which you couldn't when you were a student. So by that time it's 5 years and you're too busy with your social life. If your parents are pushing you, get married and you're on to another trip. So with all those diversions, nobody thinks of saving in the stock market. They save in instruments like insurance. Insurance is not a saving instrument. The salesman will tell you it is, but it's not a saving instrument. It's just something to give your family money in case something nasty happens, and most of the time nothing nasty happens, therefore it's really a wasted amount of money. You should do it first still. Insurance is not a saving. If you keep money in the bank, it's not a saving. But the stock market does give you some savings. And there is one simple reason for it, why you should be in the stock market. And the reason is, I'm about to write it, somebody has it a guess. One word why you should be in the stock market. Okay, the word is...
I want to be rich.
What?
I want to be rich.
Deepak, Professor Singh has no question, if you can interrupt him.
Sure.
Yeah. I think it will be good for the audience if you can clarify.
Louder.
I will request you to elaborate on making money through stock exchange, through investment and through speculation. These two things you make clear.
Well, I thought I did actually, because speculation is answered by that in physics. If you're looking for short-term answers in the market, talking of investment, not really speculation that way. Inflation is a big killer, which you don't really know very much about yet, except if you're talking of, pressure in tires or something, which is more familiar for you. Inflation in the real world basically means that what you can buy with your money today, you cannot buy with the same amount of money later. So you may have experienced a little bit of it in the last 5 years when you started spending yourself, but not as much as you would once you are actually out there earning. Now, what inflation does is, suppose you have a 10% inflation in a year, which is roughly what we are seeing, and you have the same amount of money from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. What's then going to happen is that you will only be able to buy the things that cost a certain amount of money will now cost 10% more. So you simply won't have the same buying power. Simple idea. You all know that much about inflation. Can banks solve this problem? Not really, because they won't give you 10% interest. They'll give you something less, like 5 or 6%. Riskier instruments in banks or riskier banks might give you a bit more, but that you will still fall short. So you might fall short, but if the bank gives you about 6%, you will still be about 4% short. I mean, your buying power has been reduced. So there is no point having money left and not earning enough if it doesn't buy you the same items as it would right now. So why should the stock market investment? Now I mean long-term investing. By long-term investing I mean that you pick some, I was going to come to the details shortly, but by long-term investing I mean you pick some 8 to 10 stocks or some other instruments also, which I'll speak about shortly. And you just keep buying these with your savings, a little bit of savings every month. So if you pick 10 stocks, say you've got some good stocks like HDFC Bank, or Bajaj Auto, or some nice blue chip companies, you pick some 10 good companies you like. You keep investing in the same stocks over and over again, just putting a bit. You will have huge returns. In India, typically 20% a year is what the stock market has delivered in the long term, without making any clever decisions on what stocks to pick. So this basically means that on a compounding basis, your money will go up will almost double every 3.5 years or so. So at that rate, it will be roughly about 4 times in 7 or 8 years. So in about 16 years down the line, you will have got about 16 times the capital you had at the beginning. But every month you are also putting in some more. So you will really have quite a tiny little fortune. Not a very tiny one either. So the people in my batch who have actually done this have benefited immensely from the stock market. 95% didn't know this trick. That's why I'm giving you this particular piece of information, which looks very boring. It's not like giving you hot tips on the stock market. But all I'm saying is day one, that when you get your salary, go and pick some stocks and put some money in the stock market. How you pick stocks and all, I'll make a brief mention later. So this is the one particular thing that we were talking about, that is invest. How do you invest in the market? Very simple, you just buy stocks. If you're earning some salary, say you get, I don't know what's the current starting salary, so say you're getting 2 lakhs a month or something. Okay, 1 lakh a month. So if you're getting, say, 1 lakh a month and you say in the beginning that I need to have some spending money, I put 5% now, maybe later I think of 10, that's fine. So you start buying 5,000 rupees worth of stocks every month. Don't buy too many stocks, different companies, just buy the companies you understand and keep putting money in the same ones over and over again. This is what really pays off. Okay, so this is as I was saying, there are 2 things I'm going to be talking about. The first was this, that invest for the long term and you will be, I would say actually you will be very rich in about 15 years. And the thing is not to look at very much at what you are doing, just repeat this process mechanically without thinking. The more you think, then you are more likely to disturb what you're doing. This is something that benefits from not overthinking. There are many things in life which you are better off doing done mechanically. Like when you're driving a car, there is no analysis involved. You just get onto the road, and if a dog crosses the road, at the very moment you will sort of brake and let the dog pass. You won't think about it, you will move on. So that's the way you've got to treat the investments in the stock market. The trouble is, what people do in the stock market typically, and this is where people lose their money, is they will analyze data of dogs crossing the roads for the last 10 years. Now, if you are familiar if you are familiar with the concept of big data that's being talked about quite a lot these days, you all heard the term big data, right? It doesn't mean very much. It all just means that there is a huge amount of data approaching infinity and you can find anything you're looking for in that data. So you are certain to find some correlation about dogs and how they cross the rules. Now the problem with the stock market that people get into all the time is that they will drive out, anticipate that dog. So you will start slowing down at a particular point of time where the dog may or may not happen to occur. And when the dog does come, you will probably go very hard at the dog and causing some certain damage to the animal. But this is the issue. With the stock market, there are some areas you don't want to think at all. And that is the second part of my talk. There are two parts which we'll keep switching from a little bit interchangeably and make this more like a story. The second part is that there is a certain degree of randomness in the stock market. In fact, it's a very high degree of randomness in the stock market, just like a dog crossing the road. So this is the point that is not appreciated. I'll put this in terms that you will understand, but I wouldn't dare use anywhere else. You want at some point of point T, whatever that may be, later on, you want that to be higher than T0. There are many ways, many things you can do to make sure that at least the portfolio satisfies this, if not individual stocks. But the part that is not understood is that this is random. Random as in unpredictable. Now, randomness can be pretty tricky in itself. What is random? There is I don't know if any of you see this channel called Vsauce on YouTube. Yeah, you see it. So, if you haven't seen it,
Voice
let me ask, we all kind of intuitively understand what is the random process. You throw a die, you get a 1 to 6 any number, and there is a 1 by 6 chance that one of those numbers will fall. But he says if we know all the initial conditions, we know the weight of the dice, the surface is going to fall on, if we know at what force we are throwing it, can't we calculate where it will land? Now as engineers you would think yes, and the answer is probably true. We don't really know what all information we need, that's the problem. But suppose we had all the information, suppose we had everything needed, then where it will land will be known. Now, the stock market is a little bit like that, except that there are far more variables, far more unpredictable items. So it is therefore random really, because it's almost impossible to really derive what the price will be after a period of time. It's not random as in a random number. Just like in a dice, you won't get, when you throw 1 to 6, you won't get a 10, you'll get a 1 or a 6, some predictable numbers. Here also you'll be within a certain range at a future time. If you take, for example, you think of this as a percentage return, which is always a better way of looking at the market than absolute prices. It would be more elegant not to call this random, but the percentage return as random. And you go through the exercise of looking at past percentage returns of a stock price. And if you then assume that it's a normal distribution, then you will come up with something that looks like a probability distribution where you would say there is a 1 sigma, there'll be a 66% chance for the percentage to be within a certain price and certain price, 2 sigma to be within a certain range, 3 sigma within a certain range. And if any of you later study finance, you will find that those kind of studies are pretty common and they have been used. They have been used by funds, for example, to make certain calculations. So it is not alien to you see such a item, but the problem still remains that the percentage return, where you can calculate some probabilities, will nevertheless be still a random outcome. So you don't know exactly what percentage return it will be. Also, it's not a normal distribution, so you will find far more points outside of 3 sigma than you would expect from a normal distribution. In fact, you'll find tons of them. The distribution has been studied by Mandelbrot, the fractals guy, and it is what he talks about as fact-tail distributions, which are distributions with infinite variance. So you actually can theoretically have infinite points outside of 3 standard deviations. Okay, this was a bit of a thing I could speak about, which I can't talk in my normal presentations with engineers. It's rather easier. So I mentioned all this 3 sigma stuff. But the point here, the only point here, is that the percentage return later on is random. You cannot predict it. It could go up, it could go down. It could be roughly normal, but it's not really normal. So there is a lot of unpredictability with what happens in future prices. Now this unpredictability is not properly understood. So these are the 2 big concepts. One is that invest for the long term, and we understand that the percentage return on a stock market price cannot be predicted. Why I emphasize the second one is you will encounter a lot of material which talks about the future returns being predictable. And one of the main reasons this happens is that the greatest beneficiaries of the stock market are not investors. The most money made on the stock market, even when stock prices go up, are not investors. But there is a huge industry which benefits from getting people to do things in the market. The biggest beneficiaries are probably brokers or broking institutions. I'm using a dollar symbol because it's sort of easier to draw. So this goes to industry. This goes to investors. This goes to long-term investors, are the ones who make money. And a lot of industry, which we'll talk about now, also makes money on the market. The curious thing is that the money that's made by longer-term investors, if the longer-term investors make more money, there is no benefit at all for the industry. So they are not particularly fond of long-term investors. Okay, why is this? Let's take the case of brokers. Who's a broker? A broker is no longer really an individual. Broker is your HDFC Bank or Kotak Bank, any of those banks. Or you have Goldman Sachs, they have broking outfits. All the biggest world's institutions, extremely rich and big institutions, they want you to basically be in the stock market. Now let's elaborate on be in the stock market. If you are a long-term investor, they won't like you very much. And they won't say they don't like you, but if you are just buying a little bit of stock once a month, they're not going to earn very much from you. They don't have what is called skin in the game. This is again a Taleb expression which is popular in IIT physics. I quoted him 2-3 times because he comes up with more colorful expressions than most others. But they have no particular interest in getting a long-term return in most of their products. Certainly not broking from your activities. So what everybody wants you to do is to trade, speculate. So that is why speculation trading is so popular, because it's always talked about. Whoever you're dealing with, you will soon have a relationship manager from your bank. They will keep telling you that, why don't you do this, why don't you do this on the market. They see you're hooked, then they will start calling you up every morning saying, we've got excellent information that Tata Motors is going to shoot up in the next month. Would you like to buy some stock? So then you say, why not? They'll sound very happy and trusting. It's not like that they are cheating you. They're not deliberate liars. There is actually a well-built hierarchy within the companies, which they're all themselves convinced that that is what is happening. So, anyone who collects brokerage from you wants you to trade very often. They like engineers, because engineers will try out new algorithms, new formulas, new something. They'll say, it becomes quite a selling job. They'll say, wow, the other day, see, this is going to happen to all of you. You'll think some stock, not buy it, and it'll shoot up. Since the broker talks to you all the time, he's a friend of yours. You will mention to him that, I was thinking of buying, let's say, United Spirits the other day, but I didn't buy it. And 5 days later, United Spirits shoots up. You didn't buy it. The broker remembers you had said it. He says, sir, you are so right. You're really good, most of my clients would have thought of it. So with that kind of enforcement, which anybody is too happy to receive, you will slowly but surely, it's not difficult to find yourself trading very often on the market. So this is a big lookout. You may trade for other reasons. We'll come to why you might want to trade. Especially if you're on the other side, you may want to trade for clients. That's a different story. But as an investor, you don't want to really get into too much of the short-term trading. If you want to short-term trade for the fun of it, a little gamble, you say instead of horses, the stock market is better, fine, by all means do it, but very small amounts of money. The main investment fund of yours, keep that intact. Okay, who else benefits from this apart from brokerage? There's a very obvious one, the elephant in the house, so to speak, and that is media. We have 4 business channels, the US has many business channels. We have newspapers dedicated to business, not to sports. We hardly have any sports newspapers. Though people are more interested in sports than business, but we have business newspapers. The number of business channels and sports channels are about equal. So you get the pattern. So why would business channels be interested in your being a short-term trader? Because they want you to watch the channel every day. What's the hot tip for today? So every day you'll have frenzied activity from the anchors who will all communicate with each other. Didn't you see that news item about that stock? Now let's call up Mr. X, Y, and Z and see what he feels about the stock. So you feel the excitement, palpable excitement, get into the market. That is just the way the whole thing works. And it is not very different from anything else in the world. So let's also put it in a fair perspective. I'm not damning these industries. For example, you could say about the pharmaceutical industry, this is what somebody said, that they are not so much interested in curing you as having you as a customer. So it doesn't mean the doctors are evil. There's nobody in the world who's evil. But we are all sort of caught in a particular performance situation where we do things because it's our duty or our job to do it, we get rewarded for it. We don't really think too much about the ethics. Ethics is a very, very tricky subject in this world. It's something that, one shouldn't really be condemning anybody too much or going out of the way to do it. It's better to just realize that's the way the world works. And it applies very much to the stock market. So this again is not a lecture on ethics. Why I'm mentioning this is that there are a lot of people who are inadvertently or whatever to do their jobs. And there will be a lot of noise out there which is basically trying to get you to trade short term. They don't want you to do the simple thing which will make you a lot of money, which is to just put a bit of your salary away every month and have a lovely nest egg in about 10-15 years. So that should be your goal, whatever else you do. And realizing that randomness prevents you from making the mistake of trying to predict the market. Predicting the market is always easy in the past. But you can always see a past event and say, oh yeah, that was obvious, this was about to happen. The market is about to go up or down. But you can certainly never do it in the future. As of today, nobody really knows what will happen to the Indian stock market. Well, we all know that conditions are better than they've been in the last 3-4 years. But the market has also gone up quite a lot. So this could go on, it may not go on. But the very act of just putting away a little bit of money every month ensures that you don't get suddenly caught onto on the wrong foot because you're just putting in money incrementally. And most of the money that goes in the market at any month of time, if you look at past data, you will find as positive returns. It is only when there is a big stock market crash or something that money goes down. So what you are basically doing is the power of averaging. Putting in a little bit of money every month, you don't really know which day of the month is the best day for you to get high returns. You can analyze past data, you will get some number. It's certain because data is like that. You will find, you can put stuff in a spreadsheet, write a code or something, and you'll say, okay, looking at all my past data, if I was putting money on the 7th of the month, I would have got the highest return. This will happen because there is such a number out there. It doesn't mean that it's meaningful. And this leads us to the big fallacy of the stock market that you should always think about. Let me make sure I get the expression right. Yeah. Go stock, go Dr. Pop. Do they still have a course on logic over here? Symbolic logic used to be in our time. I don't know if this particular expression was mentioned by name, but this is the fallacy which you will know about very much in plain English terms, which is causation is not correlation, or correlation is not causation. What this means is that if you have one event happening and it's succeeded by another event, or the two events happen together, they just happen to take place, but it's very easy to fall into the trap that thinking that one was the cause of the other. The stock market is full of, almost every belief in the stock market falls in this fallacy. And it's also the subject of the book again by Taleb, Fooled by Randomness. That's a brilliant read for many reasons, not even related to the market, because it gives you the thinking which has gone into the human race. The best sort of example I can think of this is malaria. Malaria was one time believed to take place if you went out at night. Because people used to go out at night and get bitten by mosquitoes. So until it was found out what the cause was, it was thought to be a disease related to going out at night. So that is where you got this fallacy. The night had nothing to do with it. But because people who they found out by observing data, people were the data, they came to this conclusion, and for many years it was believed that malaria was caused by the night. So people would stay indoors to not get malaria. And that had better effects also because they didn't get bitten by mosquitoes. So that enforced the fallacy even more. So this is a fallacy that exists all the time in life. If you think about it, you'll find many, many examples. If you pick up any newspaper, read the front page, you'll find at least 3 of these on the front page. Sports pages. Sports is enormously full of this. If you look at all the composition of the Indian cricket team, it's always been constantly blamed on one or the other. The bowler, the batsman, the captain, the umpire. There's always some blame. Causation and correlation again is the issue there. And not the observation of the fact that how many runs the batsman scores is as random as the return on the stock market price. So, there are many things in life where we simply do not accept randomness. We think there has to be a reason. So, just removal of that thought process helps in many ways and is absolutely critical in the stock market to remove it, because then you'll be able to make much simpler and more accurate decisions. Okay, I should also quickly mention, to get it out of the way, that many of you will be involved with the stock market, not as investors, but in many other areas, because they're very highly rewarding. Especially with engineering skills, because there is a whole area of quantitative finance. People who are into finance and computers, they can get a lot of money in the stock market. Stats is a huge tool. I mean, if you're looking for jobs with Goldman, one of the highest paying people in the world, I suppose. Sound knowledge of some stock market theories, more of the normal distribution type, not the mumbo-jumbo things. Knowledge of stats, knowledge of coding, how to put together maybe a Fourier transform here or there to predict prices. That gets you very high-paying jobs. So, but why do they do that? It's basically you will then produce reports. Excellent reports which can be sent to clients, and that's what they pay. Most of the brokerages are very high-powered and most respected ones. They are also respected because of their power of their reports. Their reports are a lot better. So they are sending long-term reports, great reports on the economy, all of which have no predictive power at all. They make good reading, but they keep the clients glued to that particular institution and then get them to trade as often as possible in order to get their brokerage. That's also a cycle. But that kind of work is not bad because you do get to exercise a lot of your computing power, your logic, you can find something new. And a lot of things in the market work for a short while. There's like persistence. I won't get into that part of it. If you read Mandelbrot, you will find a lot of material he's written on the predictive power. I mean, it's sort of predictive, finding something is working for a while. actual money will come from that simple investment formula. Whatever else you do, just make sure you do the investment part. Okay, now we come to the final question. That is, all I've said is put some money away in the market every month. Now, what does this mean? What do you do exactly? Combining a lot of ideas given by various people, I'll give you 4 or 5 book references to read, which are fairly sane, sound books, and you can understand them quite easily and be able to follow those ideas. But combining 2 or 3 things, simple common sense thing to do is to identify 8 or 10 really good companies which you understand. That means you'll have to take a little bit of pain to find out what these stocks are. Now, there are a lot of stocks out there, 2,000. You can't really be expected to think about 2,000 stocks. So you can take something, one of the common indices like the Sensex or the Nifty. There are then only 30, take the Nifty, it's got 50 stocks. From that, there are some names which are obvious, companies that you have dealt with, like a bank, where you know the services are good. You can just see their balance sheet, see if they don't have very bad debt. There are many ways of finding out whether a company is good or bad. And the one term you will come across if you get into more research is value. Whether to buy a stock or not is to find its value. So let's call the value V. And the market price is P. Now what is value? There are many formulas of finding the valuation of a company. There are many, many models. Benjamin Graham has got one of the best books on finding valuation, so you can read any of his works. Graham is the one who's followed by most investors who made huge amounts of money in the market, including Warren Buffett himself. So he has got simple ways of valuing the company. One that you might be familiar with, because it's mentioned a lot, is the price-earning ratio. Roughly speaking, we can imagine in a sort of a hypothetical world that the price of the stock is related directly to the earning of the stock. Try to put that in real terms, like looking at the actual earnings and the price, you won't find any correlations. But as a concept, it's a very good one to work with. Now, because we need some model at the end of the day. So if you have a valuation, say, based on earnings, and you find that the value of the company is much higher than the price of the company, say about the price of the company is 25% less than the value of the company, and it's a good company, you go ahead and buy the stock. That is the essential idea in picking stocks. And you will find a lot of companies, right now the market has gone up quite a lot, so the companies, this won't fit in very much. But don't let that stop you from investing. So just pick the companies which have at least the best valuations. You might find most of them will have a value now which is higher than the price. I'm sorry, the price higher than the value. But you could go in for at least those stocks where the price is not that much higher than the value as the ones where it's totally out of control. So this basically limits your risk in theory, because and it probably is because since a lot of people follow valuation, the big money in the world is actually looking more at valuation than any other parameter. Those stocks are unlikely to be hammered down very much because there will be buyers every time they decline. So in the real world, that is why probably you are protected. I say probably because with so many participants in the market and so many events driving the market, it is next to impossible to actually say why anything happens. There is a causation correlation thing applies. You can never be sure what is really the cause behind anything. Another instrument of interest, especially some of you will go to the US, what's very popular in the US are exchange traded funds, ETFs. These have arrived in India. They are not that liquid yet, but they are picking up. What these funds are is, they are a little bit better than mutual funds because the people who run these are the people who are behind it. They keep trying to keep the actual fund, that means the stocks that they have bought, as close to the value of the index as possible. You will see that this is actually impossible because every index is basically a weightage for a stock multiplied by the price, and then you take the total and divide by the total weightage. Now the weightage itself will change all the time with price. So with every trade, the index weightages themselves are changing pretty often. The price itself contributes to the value of the index. So the fund has to be really fairly computerized and has to quickly keep buying and selling stocks to stay close, but it will never stay totally close. But nevertheless, it will be a pretty good approximation and you will at least get the same returns as the index or very close to that with this. These funds are passive funds because all they're doing is just replicating the indices. So there are fewer people working there and they have a particular algorithm they're working with. So it's repetitive and simple, so it's much less expensive for them to run. As a result, these ETFs will cost much less than a mutual fund. So when you are saving about 1 or 2% a year in costs, compounded over 8 to 10 years, the difference can be significant. So if you feel that you really don't want to get into the market in finding out 10, 15 stocks for yourself, you just want to have some representation of the market, then ETFs is a pretty good instrument to have. The commonest one in India so far is the Nifty ETF. And these exchange-traded funds can be for anything. They can be for specific industries. They can be for specific stocks. They are there for commodities. I should also mention commodities are not an investment. Gold is not really an investment. Gold is just used as a safety against the whole world economy going bad, which somehow or the other it manages not to get bad. There are sufficient number of people making sure that it doesn't go bad. And so horrible things do happen, but not so bad that the whole system collapses and we have to go back to gold. So gold doesn't really work out as an investment. It goes up only when there is a really bad crisis like 2008-9 was there. There's not much industrial demand, so even that is not there for gold. Right, so the steps that you should be following now are to pick your 8 to 10 stocks. They should be diverse across industries. Companies should have good management. In India and elsewhere, there are a lot of, effectively know how the stock market works, I suppose. The concept works on the idea that somebody who wants to raise money for running his business, goes to investors, gets them to invest in his business, and it's done through the stock exchange. So that person is called the promoter. Some of you will become promoters. If I take statistics, 1 or 2 of you sitting here will probably end up floating a company which is quoted on some stock exchange, US or India, because every batch from IIT has got 1 or 2. So I would easily bet that there are 2 of you here. I mean, you don't know who they are, but they will be. So some of you will be promoters. Some of you will be promoters of your own companies which are not listed in the markets. Many of you will be running your own businesses. So a promoter needs funds, and the stock market is a place where you often raise funds. Now the promoters also remain the families which started these companies, say around independence time or before or after. They still stay in the business and they feel they own the business, and shareholders who maybe own 50-60% of the rest of the company are a nuisance. They are tolerated with great reluctance. They happen to be holding your shares but they have no business to. So the effective thing is if the company makes a lot of profits, they feel it's their property and not the investors, and they think of many clever ways in not paying the investors. I mean, I won't name the company, but a very well-respected company in Bombay who had a house worth probably 30,000-40,000 crores of property in Malabar Hill, which belonged to their company. They tried to quietly move it out into the director's name, but it got caught in the AGM, where one of the investors had noticed a small notice that had been given in the paper saying, how can you do this? And they quickly changed their plans. They said it was a mistake. Misquoted. That's the usual explanation. So good management is important. The less of a family-owned business, I shouldn't make this generalization, but it's about 80-90% true. So family-run businesses, just inherited businesses not run by themselves, especially in India, don't necessarily work out that way. But there are many family-owned businesses where one of the family members has taken much more interest in it and turned around one company or 2. So you do have those exceptions. It's not like the rule. Companies like, say, HDFC Bank is generally regarded as a pretty good stock, and people will want to know what's a good stock to buy. HDFC Bank is one of them. Its valuation is not as bad compared to the price as many other stocks are. It's not overflowing with debt. If the economy improves, banks are bound to do well. So all that sort of thing fits in. So those are the kind of blue chips you look for in this investment idea. So the idea is, again, to sum it up, you pick up your 8 or 10 stocks, any number you can manage. The number is not having close to 10 or above is better, because if one or two stocks do poorly, it's not going to affect your overall average. You're essentially playing averages. So that is the first part again, the investment part we talked about. And the second part is understanding the randomness of things. So don't overthink and try to figure out where the market will go. If somebody asks me what is the, where will the index be, I can give you any number, but it's rather pointless. Because where it actually goes will be, as I use as an example, if you ask 20 experts where the index will be at the end of this year, you will get 20 different answers, which means that 19 of them at least are going to be wrong. So that pretty much tells you the value of predictions. Right, I think it's 15 minutes to go, so questions and answers if anybody has any.
I'll come up with moderate.
Sure.
So we'll take quick questions. And what's the department? Physics.
Good question. Okay, basically, I guess that's a very good question. One way of looking at it is the price is equal to the value plus noise. The noise is the stock market. The entire business of movements up and down is the noise part. What the noise will do for you is that at points of time, not all the time, it will bring down the price much below the value. So that is the moment you want to grab. That is what the so-called value investors do. The Benjamin Grahams, the Warren Buffetts, they just wait patiently. What I'm actually suggesting to you is for slightly more inactive investors, that is you just buy every month and say, if you're really in the market, you should try value investing, which is to monitor stocks. Keep very good tabs of the company. You identify 10, 15 companies you're monitoring all the time. But that's fairly time consuming. If you get into that, you'll discover it anyway. But if you want to get into the valuation, that's what you need to do. And then what you will be doing is basically buying the stock when the valuation is very attractive. I think one benchmark that is used is 20 to 25% below the price. You use any valuation formula, the ones that are given by Graham are good. You find the valuation, you find it's 25% below the price, you go buy the stock. This is the idea. One other thing that will happen with value investing is when the markets are shooting up, these value investment stocks don't do as well as the really speculative stocks. They do well when the market is falling, because that's when they outperform. And overall you finish better. That is the whole idea behind value investing. Hope that helps.
I have a suggestion.
It is the grade what you think you should get. That is valuation. And the grade what you get from the instructor is price.
Or the other way around, I think.
This is physics.
Next. Chill out.
So, since you are saying that even the stock market can go down,
It does.
so what is the proportion of us that we should keep in fixed income instruments or bonds as a hedge, so that if the market goes down, we still have a return, sufficient return for the year?
Up to you. Just put 5-10% in stocks. The rest is, up to you to decide. The one way of looking at it is that when things are not really overvalued, what is overvalued is a question again. But let's say if you use some idea of value, this valuation, by the way, is a very, very hypothetical thing here. Everybody will have a different valuation formula. One person will have a different valuation of the stock, the other one will have. It is just to work with some benchmark. As I said, it's not physics, so you have to have some benchmark to make decisions. That's why we are doing this. But let's say that one common benchmark people use for valuation is the price-earning ratio. Right now it is about 21, 22, I think. When it gets to about 30, then that's really high. Then you could think of maybe having more fixed deposits and fixed income. But the trouble with them is they're not going to be giving you more returns than inflation. So that should be more of a temporary thing in times of huge overvaluation. I should also add real estate as an investment. There were huge jumps in real estate prices in India and a lot of people made a lot of money, but this may not last forever. We'll be now probably more like European or US markets. The discovery has taken place. So if you are investing in real estate, you really have to go and find some very, very cheap land somewhere, less than 10 lakhs an acre or something, near a road, that kind of thing, and you're probably not going to find it. And there's a lot of hassles involved with it. If the thing becomes valuable, somebody will go and grab your land. You'll be fighting in courts for 30 years. So it's not such an easy thing to handle. But you do need real estate, which is the house you live in. So that is always a wonderful investment because your own house is a good thing to have. So that's one unanswered question.
Okay.
So I want to ask you, somebody who is not very keen to monitor the stock market,
Yeah.
which is better for him, to find 10 companies or to invest in ETF and sit and relax?
If you can find that companies, great. Otherwise, find ETF, sit down, relax.
ETF is sure to give me benefit in the long term.
There's nothing sure in the market. But in the very long term, you're looking at 10-15 years. In the 10-15 years, you can expect 1 or 2 considerable backs, which means 1 or 2 years with negative returns, bad negative returns, maybe 20-30%. So 1 or 2 years will be bad. 1 or 2 years will be real big booms, like last year was, where you could be seeing your portfolio even doubling. So what's going to be happening is that across a 10-15 year period, you'll go through these major ups and downs, and it'll eventually work out okay. So if you want to be really passive, ETFs are a pretty good instrument. India, the liquidity is still a bit of a problem. You don't want a situation where they say that, okay, you're not making enough out of the ETF, you're going to close it down and things. Whereas in the US, they're very active. In fact, in the US, there is a source of worry because there's too much money in ETFs. So US causes the most worries in terms of financial markets because there's too much money there. So just by the sheer volume, it swamps everybody. Yeah, someone else.
Yeah, I just want to comment before I go. So there is physics in this. Even take Dirac delta function. You integrate over a period of time, it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's what he said. Just wait for 40 years. There's physics.
That's very well put. I think I'm going to use that line also.
So coming back to
नाम बता दो.
Harish.
हाँ?
Harish.
हरी डिपार्टमेंट.
Physics. So
We are welcome for Arvind's lecture. Yeah.
So, like when you were talking about incremental investment going up to for a long-term period, so like you said, you can invest every month, and I guess that's with the assumption that you are going to invest as a part of your salary. Now, doing away with that assumption, and so if I try to increase or decrease the step size of investment, say I want to invest a particular set of money, but I want to break it into steps. So, like you said, in month. So, if I increase or decrease the step size of the time, how will the overall investment increase?
Then you won't get the averaging, the integration that you're looking for. Because you're changing the equation every year.
No. I'm talking about rather than investing every month, if I would invest every 2 months or I invest every 15 days, which will be better? And
Oh, like that, okay. Any regular investment. I use 1 month because you get salary once a year. if you are self-employed, your salary distribution may not be monthly.
Yeah.
So, in that case, you can think, as regular as possible, you will get a better averaging effect. You can get, of course, you can get very lucky and because of random investing, you get a jackpot. But usually you don't count on that.
Why is the stock market so volatile nowadays?
It's always been volatile. The volatility itself is volatile. The volatility goes up and down. And again, there are so many participants in so many events, and the media is the expert in explaining why it's happening. And most of the time, their explanations are that post hoc, ergo, propter hoc, they'll see whatever is going on right now, and they'll explain that as the reason. So, typical answers would be it's very volatile right now because a lot of central bank governors have changed interest rates. A chance. But at the end, the volatility, etc., is determined by market participants, which in terms of mathematical equations, you may as well think of as infinity. And each having some incremental effect, and the integrated effect is what you see. So, the best way to think about volatility is happens, and the volatility itself goes up and down. Searching for a reason is completely useless. Serves no purpose.
How will the Greek market affect assets?
We'll all be in Greece.
Well, that is again the question. See, everything affects every market. It's the analogy for butterfly sneezes in Brazil, cargo? The answer is yes, it could. So there is always some effect, but it's immeasurable, it's random, it is not something you can work with or use to advantage.
Yeah, there is a question now. Yeah. Then uske baad
So if I don't want to be a long-term investor, so
If you don't want to be a long-term investor, then
not a short पे ही होना था, तो I just want कि अगर मान लीजिए मेरे पास कोई स्टॉक है और उसकी प्राइस हाई जा रही है and it's going high, तो मैं कब तक
By the way, for most of my Bhaiya loans, there is a 5-year MSc in economics which was started a few years ago. If you are not aware of it, MSc is integrated MSc. You are integrated MSc, right?
no,
B.Tech.
yes.
I'll answer the question. So you are basically saying that you want to get into stocks when they're undervalued or get out when they're overvalued. That is what value investors do. But the overall idea in being invested is to not get out of the stock at all. The principle of value investing is to basically, you think of yourself as buying that company. When you buy a share, you're actually buying the company and you're owning the business. So if you're owning a business, you don't really think about selling it at all. So what you could do if you have a really long-term portfolio is that when the valuations are extremely high, maybe book a little bit of your profit. Don't sell off everything. Say you reduce your portfolio exposure by 5-10% by equally selling all the stocks you have and just generating a little bit of money from that, which, if you think of buying a house at that time or just putting FDs for a while until the market cools down, something like that you can do. But the idea is not to get out because it's overvalued. The idea is to reduce exposure. Nothing very much. I mean, if they're run by big companies like Kotak as ETFs, those are fairly safe companies. You can find a lot of answers by just Googling. If you find a lot of complaints, Google ETF's name and complaints. If you find investors are complaining that they're not getting service or their returns are not good, you'll get the answers on the internet quite easily. The best thing for any service provider is the internet. As you know well, searching for restaurants and stuff. Same thing you can apply for ETFs. Okay. It was a very random thing. I actually started, I'm a computer guy, I'm not an analyst, as I was described. I got into this whole thing by accident. I'd come back, I was abroad, I was doing software, I returned to India. I was going to try something in computer graphics when the whole thing began, the craze for television ads. That didn't work out because import duties were very volatile. So at that point of time, I just met the editor of a magazine and I talked about providing some charts for his magazine because he didn't have any. We were just showing how the stock price moved. So he misunderstood me and said, oh, you want to do a column on technical analysis. So that's how I got into this technical analysis business and started writing it. But that's pure writing. Technical analysis, by the way, I should mention, though I'm known as a very well-known technical analyst in quotes, is that it's absolute mumbo-jumbo. They use terms purely from physics and maths, and the terms are very attractive, but it has no statistical validity. It is useful to two extents. One is it basically shows you how a stock is moving. So if you see that it is sort of going in a nice linear way, if you use log charts, you must use log charts. That visual input is pretty good. So that's what I use it for, just to see if a stock is corrected a little bit and time to invest a bit more. But beyond that, most of technical analysis is mumbo jumbo. Engineers get attracted to it because it uses terms like momentum, waves, angles. There's a lot of physics terms used by, I would say about technical analysis, the guy who started it, they ain't no physicists, but they've used the terms alright. So that's how I got into it. Now in the process of writing, the thing was called Bombay Stock Exchange Sensitive Index. So I abbreviated it to make it better, that's all. And as a result, now I'm stuck in a trademark lawsuit against BSE, which gets me to the legal process, but that's another story. Yeah, ETFs, I would say the first preference is do value. If you're really in the market, do value investing in bigger stocks, you'll get great returns. If you can't do that, then you do monthly investing in 10 stocks you found. If you can't do that, then you go for ETFs. If you don't want to do that, then go for mutual funds. If you go for mutual funds, go for a mix of mutual funds. Because ETFs are less expensive. You see, all these guys will take some part of your capital as a service fee. So you lose 1 or 2% of compounding interest a year. Now you're thinking of long term, that's become substantial. Also ETFs, looking at the US performance, they have generally outperformed mutual funds. That's the second reason. Yeah, please.
My name is Gaurav, I'm from Aerospace Department. Sir, you mentioned that this is completely random, like we should assume that it is random, we should come.
Well, what is random? We got to also put the randomness in check. We are saying very precisely the percentage return variable is random. It slightly follows a normal distribution. That is what the randomness is.
So, my worry is that being engineers from, by flood, that it is very likely to fall more than calculating when the dog will actually cross the road, by putting all the mathematics and physics. Would you share some tips to keep us away from that, especially when we have put down?
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Could you share some tips to keep us engineers away from putting mathematics and physics for predicting?
No, you're welcome to do it. It's big fun. All I'm saying is,
I know, but it is very difficult.
But all your physics and maths, you don't put too much of your capital. And you can, if you are using all of that, you can very well become a service provider. That's a very high earning profession. If you are coming up with reports with a lot of maths and physics, selling them as newsletters, it's a pretty good money earning source. Yeah. But it's different from investing for yourself.
How to keep yourself away from that?
I'm saying don't necessarily put yourself away. If you feel tempted to do it, do it. But do it as a theoretical exercise. If you experiment with your own money, just a little bit of your own money. Keep doing the other thing.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
I think the little kids are here, so I don't want them to wait. So, और आगे बुलाने? One more question. Ajay, the show is starting, then you can still answer the question.
That's a very good question. He is saying why does the stock market feel inflation? Okay, the reason is actually very logical. I'm doing it in a sort of a model way, not in a real life thing, but you will get the concept. See what, as I said, the price of the stock will depend on the earnings of the stock. Now the earnings of the stock depend on inflation because if you think what is earnings is the profit of the company. Profit is the price at which it's selling goods. The cost of the earnings is what you're selling minus the cost it is incurred. If they both go up by the inflation rate, the earnings also go up by inflation rate. So as a result, it will keep close to inflation at least. And if it's a good company, it will do better than inflation. It would be same in as I said, in an idealized situation. But if you're picking reasonably good stocks or replicating the index, you will normally get a little bit higher on inflation. But at least you won't fall behind inflation. You see, that is